You might think it's their words that manipulate you. But it's not. It's their voice. The calmness when they lie. The sweetness when they're hiding something. The silence that punishes you without a sound. There's a pattern here, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. You see, narcissists don't always raise their voice to control you. Sometimes, they whisper. Sometimes, the most damaging thing someone says is said with a smile. That's why in this video, I won't just talk about words. I'll walk you through how narcissists use tone of voice as a weapon, and how that tone slips past your logic and buries itself in your nervous system. This isn't just about language. This is about emotional regulation, about trauma, and about something even deeper than that. How your body reacts before your mind catches up. That's the secret they don't want you to realize. They're not gaslighting you with facts. They're gaslighting you with feelings. And the delivery? That's everything. Let's be honest. Have you ever found yourself nodding along to someone, thinking something feels off, but not being able to explain why? That's not intuition being vague. That's your body detecting the distortion before your brain can translate it. And narcissists, whether consciously or instinctively, know exactly how to use dark psychology to hack that system. They'll speak in a tone that makes you feel like you're the one overreacting. Like you're the one imagining things. And here's the part that hurts the most. You'll doubt yourself, while still trying to earn their validation. That's the loop. That's how control works. So today, I'm going to help you unhook from that cycle. I'll show you 5 types of tone narcissists often use, and how each one hits a different wound inside you. But more importantly, I'll show you how to listen to yourself more than to them. Because when you learn to hear beyond the surface, when you can name the tone before you absorb the shame, that's when the game ends. You don't have to fight their words. You just have to stop letting their tone rearrange your nervous system. So let's begin. Let's start unmasking. Before we talk about how narcissists use tone to control you, we need to talk about why it works in the first place. Because here's the truth. Your brain is not designed to analyze tone. It's designed to respond to it. Long before we had language, we had sound. And tone, pitch, volume, rhythm was our first warning system. A calm tone? Safe. A sharp tone? Danger. A detached tone? Rejection. These emotional signals travel faster than logic. You don't even think about them. Your nervous system just reacts. And this is where the danger lies. Because while your brain is trying to be reasonable, your body is already shifting into defense. This is how a narcissist gains control without raising their voice, or even saying anything objectively wrong. It's not about what they say. It's about how their tone manipulates your internal state. It might be a sigh, a sudden change in pitch, a sarcastic lilt that makes you feel small. And before you know it, you're anxious. You're overthinking. You're shrinking. That's not random. That's conditioning. And for many survivors of emotional abuse or unresolved trauma, that conditioning happens fast. You begin to associate certain tones with danger, disapproval, disconnection, and your body starts adjusting, desperately trying to avoid those tones at all costs. That's how you lose your voice. Not because they yell louder, but because their tone teaches your body that speaking up means pain. This is dark psychology at its most subtle. It's not shouting, it's shaping. It's slowly molding your emotional response until you stop trusting yourself. That's how gaslighting works, by the way. Not just through denial of facts, but through tones that confuse, belittle, or guilt you into silence. 1 minute you feel seen. The next, you're invisible. 1 minute you're praised. The next, you're punished with detachment. This unpredictability? It's not a flaw in their communication style. It's the point. The goal is simple. To keep you chasing consistency. Because when you're chasing, you're not thinking. You're not grounded. You're not regulated. That's why narcissists don't fear confrontation. They fear your clarity. Because once you recognize that their tone is a tactic, once you realize you're not crazy, you're being trained, something shifts. You begin to regulate again. You pause. You breathe. You observe. And that moment of observation? That's the beginning of power. There comes a moment, subtle but powerful, when something inside you shifts. You stop trying to decode what they really meant. You stop obsessing over the tone they used, the look they gave, the pause between their sentences. You stop playing investigator, and you start asking something else entirely. Why does this still affect me so much? That's when the real healing begins. Because up until now, you weren't reacting to them. You were reacting to a memory, to a younger version of yourself that still needed validation, still feared abandonment, still equated tone with danger. But in that pause, when you feel the trigger rise and choose to breathe instead of react, something new begins. You're regulating. And that emotional regulation? That's not weakness. That's power. Narcissists thrive in chaos, in confusion, in urgency. When you slow things down, you disrupt their game. Because now, their tone no longer overrides your body. You've reclaimed your nervous system. You hear the guilt trip, but it doesn't land. You sense the sarcasm, but you don't spiral. You notice the passive aggression, but you stay grounded. That's the shift. You no longer feel the need to explain your feelings to someone who's using their tone to make you question them in the first place. You don't beg for clarity from someone who uses confusion as a form of control. You don't ask for warmth from someone who weaponizes silence. You start to realize, I don't have to fix this. I only have to see it. And that seeing is everything. Because what breaks the spell of a toxic relationship isn't confrontation. It's awareness. And in that awareness, you come back to yourself. You remember your own breath. You notice the space between words. You reconnect with your own voice. Not to argue, but to self-heal. You don't have to match their energy. You don't have to meet sarcasm with defense or silence with panic. You only have to remember that your response is your power. You're no longer the version of yourself that danced for their approval. You've outgrown that loop. And now, you get to choose. That choice may not feel loud. It may feel like nothing at first. But it is everything, because it's the moment you stop living in their world and start returning to your own. Let's be real. Not all narcissists scream. Some manipulate you with a smile. And here's the part they never want you to realize. The most dangerous form of control isn't always loud. It's subtle. It's familiar. And it sounds like this. Tone 1. The overly sweet voice. This is the sugar-coated poison. It's that voice that makes you feel special, adored, even worshipped, especially in the beginning. But there's something slightly off. It feels forced, performed, like a script. And that's exactly what it is. This tone often shows up during love bombing. When a narcissist uses exaggerated charm to create emotional dependency, you start craving that sweetness. You start adjusting yourself to keep receiving it. And before you know it, you're not being loved. You're being managed. Tone 2. The cool and popular voice. This tone drips with effortless charisma. It's laid back, casual, and it makes you feel like they're doing you a favor just by talking to you. But underneath, there's condescension. This tone positions them above you, like they have access to something you don't. You feel flattered, but also a little smaller, a little less certain. That's not an accident. It's a status play, a manipulation tactic that makes you fight for inclusion. Tone 3. The martyr voice. This one is subtle and deadly. It's soft, sorrowful, full of disappointment. They don't yell at you. They guilt you. I guess I'll just handle everything like I always do. Sounds familiar? This tone makes you question yourself. It taps into your need to help, to please. And before you know it, you're apologizing for things you never did. This is how gaslighting hides in plain sight. Tone 4. The raging voice. This one's easier to spot, but harder to escape. It's loud, explosive, meant to intimidate. They don't want resolution. They want control. This tone triggers your fear response. It overrides your logic and sends you into panic. And once you're dysregulated, they win. because now you'll do anything just to calm them down. Tone 5. The monotone silence. The final tone isn't loud. It's indifferent, flat, emotionless, dismissive. It says, "You're not worth engaging with." And that, too, is a weapon. This tone shows up when you're no longer useful, when they want to punish you by withdrawing affection. But they won't leave. They'll just starve you emotionally, hoping you'll beg, bend, or break. So what do you do with this awareness? You remember this. Tone is a tactic. And just because it sounds calm, sweet, or logical, doesn't mean it's safe. You don't have to match their voice. You don't have to fight to be heard. You only have to do one thing. Name the pattern and choose not to play it. Because the moment you stop reacting to tone is the moment you start reclaiming your peace. There's a power in not reacting. And at first, it doesn't feel like strength. It feels like emptiness. It feels like sitting across from someone who once triggered your entire nervous system and feeling nothing but stillness. Not coldness, not indifference, just presence. That's the power they never wanted you to discover. The power of emotional regulation. Because once you're regulated, you're no longer readable. You're no longer baitable. You're no longer programmable. That's what breaks the loop. They may still sigh, still guilt trip, still withhold their voice in silent protest. But now, you don't personalize it. You don't translate it as, "I did something wrong." You simply notice. You stay in your body. And that moment, that pause, is sacred. Because for so long, you didn't pause. You reacted. You performed. You twisted yourself into emotional origami just to feel loved again. That was survival. But this is recovery. This is what self-healing looks like. You're not seeking validation from their tone. You're validating yourself by staying centered, even when their energy tries to throw you off. You're not begging for closure. You're closing the cycle with silence. Not the kind of silence that punishes, but the kind that protects. You begin to realize that your worth isn't measured by how calm you keep someone else. You're not a peacekeeper. You're a whole person. And real peace? It doesn't come from their approval. It comes from your own nervous system saying, "I'm safe now. I don't need to explain myself anymore." That's what nervous system regulation feels like. No racing heart. No short breath. No tightening in the chest when someone raises their voice or withdraws it. Just awareness. And with that awareness, you make new choices. You don't walk on eggshells. You don't chase after someone who manipulates you with tone. You don't sit in silence, hoping they'll change. You walk away clean. Not because you're over it, but because you're finally in it. In your body. In your breath. In your power. This is no longer about proving anything. It's about protecting everything. And the most valuable thing you have? It's your clarity. So hold on to it. Speak less. Observe more. And remember, if someone's voice keeps destabilizing yours, that's not a connection. That's conditioning. And you are no longer available for that. The scariest thing to a narcissist isn't your anger. It's your calm. Because in your calmness, they lose access. You're not reacting. You're not defending. You're not seeking. You're just present. And for someone who lives in distortion, presence is a mirror they can't survive. That's the power of emotional regulation. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to prove they're wrong. You only need to stand still. In your knowing. And that stillness? It speaks louder than any scream. It says, "I see what this is. And I won't play anymore." Not as punishment. Not to win. But to return to yourself. That's what real self-healing looks like. Not fixing others. Not rewriting the past. Just choosing not to betray yourself again. If this message found you, maybe it's because you're already healing. You've started to sense when something is off. You've started to pause instead of panic. You've started to breathe instead of break. You're not broken. You're becoming whole. Let's normalize this kind of clarity. Let's honor the quiet strength it takes to walk away. Not in rage, but in peace. If this message stirred something in you, leave a red heart in the comments. Not for them, but for the version of you who finally stopped chasing chaos. You are not overreacting. You are remembering. And what you do with that clarity, that's where the real story begins. I'll meet you there.